Yeah, that's all true. This wonderful Wheeler Centre does all that stuff for writers and readers and lovers of ideas. So I want to thank the Wheeler Centre for being such a good partner with PEN Melbourne and for tonight, our partnership tonight. So I'm Chris from PEN Melbourne, and I want to extend a warm welcome to all here at the Wheeler Centre. And tonight, an especially warm welcome to Ma Thida, who's sitting in the front row and who you'll see soon, our very special guest. Before going on, I want to speak the words that are familiar and very well known to you by now. The acknowledgement of country is always an exceptional way to proceed at these events. And in the wake of the negative referendum of 2023, these words carry even more weight and meaning to lead us to greater understanding and to continue the work towards righting the historic and ongoing injustices experienced by First Peoples. So this evening we're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of this land. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, as they are the custodians of the world's oldest continuous living culture and their ongoing connection to the lands and waters. We absolutely respect that work. We acknowledge that from time immemorial, First Peoples have practiced their law, customs and languages and nurtured country through their spiritual, cultural and material connections to land, water and resources. So PEN Melbourne is delighted and honoured to have Ma Thida here with us this evening. She's in conversation with Michelle Aung Thin. Michelle was born in Yangon and grown up in Canada, and she's the author of 2 highly recommended books, 2 novels that explore the complexities of life in Burma. One, The Monsoon Bride, and Hasina, which is a story of the Rohingya crisis, but told through the eyes of a child refugee. It's wonderful to be able to bring Michelle and Ma Thida here together for this conversation about Myanmar and the ongoing struggle for democracy. I've known about Ma Thida's work and her writing through PEN International for some years and have found her always to be clear-eyed, deeply knowledgeable, with a strong intellect and the courage to continue to speak out about the persecution and silencing of writers, particularly in Myanmar. More recently, in her capacity as the chair of PEN International's Writers in Prison Committee, she leads our campaigns for writers at risk around the world, and bringing to that her own experiences of being threatened and incarcerated in her own country, and as a committed writer, an activist. And after spending some real time with Thida yesterday and today, I've come to know at close hand her exceptional command of the challenging and necessary work she does. She's such a spirit. In particular, on this visit to Australia, she's a spokesperson and is doing a lot of talking about the brutal attack on the democratic processes and the murderous regime in Myanmar. How does a person leave their beloved country, leaving behind her profession as a surgeon, to dedicate herself to the work of democracy activist and writer? Well, spending almost 6 years in the inhumane conditions of Insein Prison may have helped that. But we're going to learn more about Thida's life and work this evening. But firstly, I want to introduce you to Anna Takluem. Anna came here as a refugee and from Myanmar, and since the military coup of February 2021, she is an active voice in her community, condemning the Myanmar military forces. So tonight, Anna will welcome Thida and any members of the Burmese community who are with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anna Thakdum, and I will be introducing and welcoming Ma Thida in Burmese language. အားလုံးပဲမင်္ဂလာပါဒီနေ့ကြာရောက်လာကြတဲ့ဒီတိုင်းရင်းသားညီကောင်မများအားလုံးကိုကျွန်မအနေနဲ့မင်္ဂလာပါလို့နှုတ်ခွန်းဆက်တာပါတယ်အခုလိုမျိုးဒီ Wheeler Center မှာဒီ PEN Melbourne ကနေပြီးတော့မှစီစဉ်တဲ့ဟောပြောပွဲမှာဆရာမတီတာကိုဖိတ်ခေါ်ခွင့်ရတဲ့အတွက်အင်မတန်မှဂုဏ်ယူရပါတယ်မြန်မာပြည်မှာနေခဲ့တော့ဆရာမရဲ့စာအုပ်တွေကိုမဖတ်ခဲ့ရပေမဲ့ဒီအိန္ဒိယမှာဒုက္ခသည်ဖြစ်နေထိုင်ခဲ့ရတော့ဆရာမရဲ့စာအုပ်တချို့ဖတ်ပြီးတော့မှဆရာမကိုစာအုပ်အားဖြင့်ယဉ်ကျေးခဲ့ရပါတယ်ဆရာမရဲ့စိတ်တက်ခိုင်မှာပြတ်သားမှုတွေဒီနူးညံ့တဲ့နှလုံးသားနဲ့လူတွေပေါ်မှာထားတဲ့မေတ္တာစေတနာတရားတွေဆရာမရဲ့ထက်မြက်မှုနိုင်ငံရေးရည်တည်ချက်တွေနောက်အင်းစိန်ထောင်အတွင်းမှာအမျိုးသမီးတယောက်အနေနဲ့ပေါ့နော်ဆရာမအနေနဲ့ဖြတ်တန်းခဲ့ရတဲ့ကာလမှာဆရာမရဲ့စိတ်တက်ရှင်သန်မှုတွေကိုပေါ့နော်ဒီစာအုပ်တွေတစ်ဆင့်ကနေတစ်ဆင့်ခန်းစားသိရှိရပြီးတော့မှအင်မတန်မှလေးစားခဲ့ရတဲ့ဆံပြအမျိုးသမီးဖြစ်ခဲ့ပါတယ်ဒီຫນွေဦးတော်လှန်ရေးမှာလည်းဆရာမရဲ့ပါဝင်မှုတွေကိုမြင်ရကြားရတဲ့အပေါ်မှာဆရာမပေါ်မှာပိုရေးပေါ့နော်ချစ်မြတ်နိုးမှုတွေလေးစားမှုတွေပိုတိုးရပါတယ်ခုလိုမျိုးဆရာမကိုလူကိုယ်တိုင်မြင်တွေ့မိတ်ဆက်ခွင့်ရတဲ့အတွက်လည်းအတိုင်းမတိဝမ်းသာရပါတယ်ဆရာမရဲ့နောက်ဆုံးထပ်ထားတဲ့ amaze ပေါ့နော်ဒီဝန်ကပါစာအုပ်ကိုလည်း order တင်ထားပြီးပါပြီဆရာမကိုချစ်မြတ်နိုးရတဲ့အကြောင်းတွေကိုအများကြီးပြောဖို့အချိန်မလုံလောက်တာမို့ဆရာမဟောပြောမှုတွေကိုနားထောင်ဖို့စင်မြင့်ဖို့ကိုဆရာမကိုတလေးတစားဖိတ်ခေါ်ပါတယ်ရှင် Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words. Now, many of you will already know about the PEN empty chair. It sits here alongside the speakers and it remains empty. The chair signifies the person, the writer we would like to have here with us, but who cannot come along because they're imprisoned or have been in other ways silenced. And here I want to quote Ma Thida's words from PEN's annual case list. This is the emblematic list of cases of those writers silenced and persecuted that PEN campaigns for across the year. These are her words. The case list unfurls the complex terrain of freedom of expression in which writers continue to face a deepening onslaught on their work and also their lives. It reinforces the message that those who document and bear witness are often deliberately targeted precisely because of the role their work plays. Increasingly, not only are writers targeted, but their loved ones, their families, their friends are targeted to amplify the threat to them. And tonight we acknowledge Wei Mo Nyang. Wei Mo Nyang, a writer, Myanmarian writer, poet, pro-democracy activist and a member of PEN Myanmar, is currently serving a combined sentence of 54 years in prison. In the immediate aftermath of the military coup 2021, Wei Mo Nyang rose to prominence as a leader of the anti-coup protest movement and was among those who popularised the idea of banging pots and pans as a non-violent act of resistance to the military's junta. He was initially arrested in April 2021 by the junta that reportedly used an unmarked vehicle to ram him while he was driving on a moped as part of a protest rally. In August 2022, Wei Mo Nyang was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment on multiple counts of incitement, a charge routinely used against critics of the regime. In April 2023, Wei Mo Nang was convicted of several charges, including rioting, robbery and incitement, and sentenced to a further 20 years imprisonment, resulting in a cumulative total of 34 years. In May 2023, he was convicted of high treason for his role as a protest leader and sentenced to 20 years imprisonment. Already serving a sentence of 34 years imprisonment, this latest ruling extends his imprisonment time to a combined total of 54 years in prison. And last year, as a project of PEN Melbourne, we asked Michelle to write a letter to Wei Mo Nang. It's something we do in PEN, writing to writers in prison and or their families to give support. And she wrote this line at the very end of her letter. As writers, we share a common cause. A civil society, a just society, cannot exist without us. So I'm writing to tell you that even though you don't know me, whenever I listen to a student's poem in class, whenever I bang my pots and pans on the stove getting dinner ready, whenever I watch a politician squirm at a satirical joke, I will be thinking of you. And so this is PEN's unflinching work to stand beside writers around the world who are prepared to risk all, to call out for justice and truth. We say to them, you are not alone. So we'd like you to join us in that work sometime too, if you'd like to think about it. But in the meantime, please help me to welcome Ma Thida and Michelle to the stage.
I have to check it's a fist away from my face. Okay. I've been instructed. Well, first of all, I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping, which is to say thank you very much to the Wheeler Centre for facilitating this conversation, to RMIT Culture, and of course, PEN Melbourne. There is, of course, the empty chair there. Panda is how I know Wei Mo Nang. And it was beautiful to hear those words and to remember that letter. Thank you, Chris. I just wanted to let you know as well that Mr. Myo A will be selling books of Ma Thida's latest book, which is Amaze. And I've got my pen because I bought a copy and you're going to sign it for me at the end. I hope you realize. But Ma Thida will sign copies for you as well, and you can pre-order copies. The other thing I was going to say is we will actually have questions at the very end, which we'll do in English and in Myanmar language for anybody who wants to ask questions of Ma Thida. So I'll let you know when that's happening. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that, yes, we are talking about Myanmar's struggle for democracy tonight, but we're taking it from a very particular perspective. This is a PEN Melbourne event. We're in the Wheeler Centre, so we really do need to talk about democracy from the perspective of writers and readers, because writers and readers are both at risk, I think, in Myanmar. And I just wanted to do a little shout out here for PEN. You know, like, news cycles move on, but PEN keeps track of the conflicts which endure. And it's really important that we guard things like the freedom of expression, because they do actually make a difference to civil society. A portion of the takings from tonight's event will be donated to PEN Myanmar as well. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you for your generosity. So, I wanted to do my own introduction to Ma Thida because we actually have met before. It was 2014, it was Yangon, it was steamy, and I was introduced to Ma Thida. I went round to her, the journal office where she was working as an editor, and I was just swept into action. She just said, okay, well, come do this event with us. We're gonna read our work, our poems, our literature to people on a train, and we're gonna go around Yangon. It's gonna be great. It wasn't legal, mind you, but it was fun. And then, PEN Myanmar had meetings, and I was dragged to those, and I was made to meet other writers and poets. And I have to say, this woman is a force of nature. So I know her. I'm delighted to have her here. It's actually been 10 years since we met, 2014 to 2024, and a lot has changed, which is, I guess, the subject of the book. But I wanted to let you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience, and specifically as a writer. You began training as a surgeon, but that was the point in your life when you started writing. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to begin writing?
Well, I think my great grandfather from my mother's side, he's a bookworm. So I inherited, and then after reading a lot, and I so much inspired for this kind of the reading. And then I was so lucky to have my parents. They are from not from the capital city. My father's from Shan State, my mom's from Moon State. So I have been exposed to the other people's plight, especially the poverty of the people in those parts of the country. And not just in those parts of the country, but also in the Yangon, the former capital, there is obvious poverty. And I started thinking seriously about how I can contribute by helping them voicing out what's the reality on the ground, something like that. So I started writing at the age of 16.
It's very much like Chekhov, the doctor who also wrote, yes?
Yeah, at that time I was in my first year of medical school.
Yeah. I have to say, when I was in Myanmar, as an Australian writer, I have to say the conditions that writers dealt with there were a real shock to me. So I wondered if you could describe to us, it sounds so glib, I just started writing short stories, but actually there's an inherent danger in being a writer in Myanmar, and there was a particular danger at that moment in the years leading up to 1988. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, the censorship started in 1962, 4 years before I was born. So you could imagine there was no independent news journalism, news media whatsoever. So all states-owned TV, at that time no TV, the radio station and the current affair news journals. Then the periodicals, even for the periodicals, there is a very heavy censorship. So what we learned through these books is very limited. That's why I was so lucky to have my parents to see vividly from my eyes what's going on in the country. But I know I couldn't write these things, very frankly, in my piece, something like that. We know the limit. So at that time, some books has been banned and some writers already being sent to prisons for their works, something like that. So I know we have freedom to write, but there is no freedom to get published, something like that. So that's for that reason, it's very much like a lot of our writers are very much entrenched in the self-censorship these days, not just state censorship. In the sense of, some of the topics is becoming a taboo for us. For that reason, we deliberately refrain from touching that. But of course, as creative writers, we use the creativity to expand our freedom. That's why I used to say, as a writer in Myanmar, our creativity never, because of the freedom we have, our creativity is more or less resting on the hunting for the freedom we want to have. So we use a lot of tactics, and the good thing is our readership is very, very good using the imaginative power. So they can read between the lines beyond the text. So we use a lot of metaphors, and even we use some particular names. When we want to mention some characters, we use the name in different forms of the pronunciation, something like that. And the good things of the Burmese literature, the language itself has so many ambiguous vocabularies we can play with. So something like that. But even with that, we still have a potential, at least to ban, there are altogether 3 categories for the writers: blacklist, brown list, and the green list, something like that. So yeah, I think my name was in brown list just before 1988, but after 1988, my name went to the blacklist.
Right. A rite of passage, if you like. So tell me more about I remember this short story about a crab. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Quite a famous short story. Yeah.
Yeah, in these days, we know the grip of the military. At that time, the former military dictator Ne Win, he took the power in 1962 until 1988. So the grip of the military power was so intense. So people, because of the very heavy censorship, very heavy propaganda, very inefficient education, I normally say our society is like the intellectually blind society. For that reason, a lot of people thought, we cannot even against the military power forever, something like that. But just before the 1988 protests, Andawari Uintin, very well-known journalist and a writer, he wrote a small little piece and saying that, the crab seems like very strong, that the shell is very sharp, so and so, hard, but his eyes, the eyes of the crabs, is the key weak point. If we can hit the eyes, they will deliberately cannot do anything and they're going to die, something like that. So it's a lot of metaphor encouraging the people thinking about how we can touch the eyes of the crab in terms of the weakness of the military power, something like that.
A small thing and yet so incredibly inspiring. So one of the moments that stood out for me in your prison memoir, which is Prisoner of Conscience, was the way that the poet and political activist Ma Thida greeted you when you were first brought into prison. So Ma Thida, you went from never was on the green list, brown list, and then directly to the black list, and then you were arrested. So maybe actually we should talk about, if you could tell us a little bit how that came about, and then I'll ask you about how you were greeted in prison.
Well, I involved in the protest in '88, and then after that, after the coup in '88 September, the very first military government, and I involved too much with the NLD, National League for Democracy, led by Aung San Suu Kyi. I having working for the information section of NLD. And then after 1989, after her house arrest, I was becoming the activist, underground activist, something like that. So they having chasing 2 women. One woman, they got the information, one medical doctor, she's too much involved in against the military, and another woman's writer. But finally, they found it out it's only one person. It's not 2. At that time, we were against the National Convention. In 1990, there was the general election, and NLD won the majority of seats. But instead of transferring the power to the winning party, military introduced the National Convention to draw the draft of the Constitution. But this National Convention took more than 14 years to finish drawing the draft of the Constitution. It turned out to be the totally undemocratic one. So I really felt this is the kind of the detour. So I was against the National Convention. So that was my crime. But the charges is 5 years, 7 years imprisonment for endangering public serenity, contact with 3 years for contact with illegal organization, because they accused me. I read periodicals published by a parallel government based in Thailand, something like that. My crime is reading the periodicals. But 5 years imprisonment for printing that journal, and the 5 years for distributing it. Indeed, I didn't print, but yeah, was accusation, so they charged me 20 years imprisonment.
Right. And when you first arrived at Insein Prison in the general cell, you were greeted by the poet and political activist Ma Thida, who yelled at you or shouted at you the first line from her poem, A Single Match. And that line is, "Did you say 20 years?" What an incredible greeting. I have to say, though, there's a real marked use of humor and the driest and most ironic of wit in the poetry and the literature of the activists. So this wit is incredibly effective. Panda is an example of somebody who's incredibly witty, but it's also very, very dangerous. So what is it, do you think, that makes the military so sensitive to humor?
I think we do have a very strong tradition of having tanjat. Tanjat is kind of the rapping style of expressing very beautifully crafted criticisms against anyone who make the wrongdoing, something like that. It's a very long tradition, and we enjoy it during the lunar calendar New Year period. We make this tanjat. So tanjak is more like the dark humor, something like that. That's really effective, and a lot of people felt very encouraged by saying these words, you know. And because of this very heavy censorship, we cannot even direct criticisms against anyone else. So that's why we just trying to say something in this kind of the dark humor or something like that. And then the society appreciate that so much. They understand how much powerful this kind of dark humor. For that reason, I think the military felt so very allergic to that kind of thing. They know how far this can backlash to them through the understanding of the whole society.
So it's a very effective way of getting the truth out there and mitigating the threat a little bit. Yeah. I actually, you know, it's funny because you're talking about the dark humor, and it reminds me of another moment when we first met in that office of the journal PEN Melbourne. Sorry, my Burmese is terrible. Echoing voice, I think, is the term of it in English. And I remember how you introduced me to your colleagues by name, but also by the prison terms that they had been through. And none of those prison terms were short. It was, this is my editor, he was in prison for 10 years. This is my managing editor, he was in prison for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. And it was kind of shocking and a little bit, you know, it was dark humor. But, you know, prison, you know, I read in your memoir what the experience was like and the things that you did. It's not, there's only so far that I think humor can go. So can you tell us a little bit about what that experience is like?
Well, I think because of this kind of my senior editors and writers, they all have more or less the imprisonment experience. That's why I was a little bit happy when I was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment. Now I have my chance to write my own prison memoir, something like that. So for that reason, yeah, we more or less the same, you know, trying to express what's going on, not just in the society, but also in this kind of the area. I think this pretty much affecting, I think, even for myself, you know. So I think after my prison memoir has released, and the current younger generation, they all also inspired, so they don't mind to be spending some time in prison. They just try to change the country, whatever the risk is, something like that. So the emotional connection and passing the spirits of revolution from generation to generation is somehow connected to the imprisonments, because it was like very normal. So as you mentioned, you know, you just go into the intellectual society, and you can learn how much of us has been having this similar, more or less a similar experience, either in prisons or having interrogation at the military camp, something like that.
It sort of seemed to be aligned with people who were kind of much more self-censoring, and then people who were prepared to make more of a risk, or who became Yeah.
Yeah. In the past, I think before 2021, it was more like that kind of the two extreme groups. One group is very dedicated and ready to do whatever, but one group was in very deep fear. They try not to involve in any part of the political activities. But I think after 2021 failed coup attempt, people, most of us are ready to face any risk, because without any political activities, every single one has a similar risk to be treated very, very badly by the military, so they don't make much.
It's a stark choice, though. Choose to be a self-censoring writer or choose prison. It's, I don't know what I would choose, to be honest. So I'm going to go to another part of your memoir where you talk about how it felt to know that people outside. So PEN organized internationally for people to support you and to let you know that you were remembered. And it was a very moving moment in your memoir where you realized that people outside of Myanmar knew who you were. Can you tell us how that felt and what you thought?
Absolutely thrilled. I'm so thrilled. And I never ever heard of PEN before 1990. And when I started learning about the works of the PEN, and I was so inspired and touched, how comes I was no one indeed. I just a short story writer. I was a very quite still young woman. And then I feel so much encouraged by recognizing my work, and that's why I always believed that my imprisonment was not a waste. It was very much taken care by the PEN Society, Amnesty Society. That means a lot, and I feel I'm very owed to PEN. That's why I'm happy to serve PEN again, and something like that, So it's really, really very touching. After, I think, around about 2-3 years after I was released, some of my friends, they told me at the foreign ministry, they even assigned one civil servant to keep recording and keep all the documents, because in these days there was not much the internet developed, so there was a very strong letter writing campaign from PEN centers all over the world. So the foreign ministry receiving a bunch of the letters and the postcards, but I never ever seen them. They just collecting and they destroy.
And you had your own file of letters. That's a beautiful thing. It brings me, though, to the idea of the reader and how the reader kind of exists in Myanmar. Because I remember in 2014, again, you told me at a PEN meeting that parents often censored what their children were reading, and really it was only the 19th century and early 20th century English novelists, of all things, that they were allowed to read, and it was because they were frightened for their children that they might come across ideas that would put them in danger. So that's such a huge censoring, of information, of culture. It's a kind of mental starvation. Do you think that's shaped attitudes to democracy in Myanmar?
Yeah, it was. That's why people have no idea what their rights are. They really never know about what is human rights. That's why they just trying to accommodate themselves to this very brutal environment. They just try to survive in this censor environment. For that reason, even the parents, they don't care about the others. They just want their kids not to be involved in political activities, which can make their lives change. So only a few parents can let their kids to do whatever they do. So I feel I was so lucky to have my parents. Otherwise, I will be the same. But it's after the past decades, it has been changed. The relaxations of the censorship in 2012 and beyond, making the society comes to their sense, okay, they are the human rights, they are their rights. That's why after this 2021 Spring Revolution started, people started saying that without our consent, nobody can govern us. So I feel this is the biggest ever achievement in our history, when the whole civil society, all the civilians stoop up and say, we the key changer for the country. So without our consent, none of the military guy can govern us. This is,
Yeah, it is an amazing moment. And, you know, it has been 10 years since we first met. There's been elections in between 2015 and 2020. And while we've spoken about your book, Prisoner of Conscience, which came out in 2015, at a time when maybe you thought, you know, this is never going to happen again, it actually has happened again. So I think, you know, Myanmar was lauded for being a country on the path to democracy, but I want to move to your new book now, which is all about that period between 2010 and 2020, where the path to democracy proved to be something completely different. So can you tell us a little bit more about this idea of the maze and your new book, please?
Indeed, I wrote another book. It's called The Roadmap, and it was published earlier than my present memoir. And the roadmap is all about the history of Myanmar fighting for democracy from 1988 to 2010. So in that book, I used altogether 7 chapters, because the earlier military regime, they said we have a 7 steps roadmap to democracy. But their meanings of democracy is disciplined democracy, something like that. So I wrote altogether 7 chapters for my book, and the last chapter is called Fork in the Road. So it means that we can, at the tip of the fork in the road, and the future road can be varied, something like that. So after the 2010, and during this, the quasi-civilian, quasi-military governments, administration from 2015 to 10 to 15, 15 to 20. And then people keep asking me where you are now. You know, I keep saying we are not yet to reach the destination. That's why for me, I already expected something can be happen, not as we expected, because according to our logic, of course, this is not a promising future if they do the military coup. But the military guides are beyond our logic. We cannot imagine how do they think. So these days, in these decades, from 2010 to 2020, I keep saying we are still at the fork in the road. There might be U-turn, or there might be other way means that the country might choose. But after 2021, the military coup attempt, I started thinking, okay, the international media and community has been saying that we are already being on the road to democracy during these past decades. And then they started saying that we make a U-turn. And then I said, okay, if we say U-turn, we might be reached from point A to point B or point C. And then we may back to point A. That's been the U-turn. But these decades, we never ever reached to any point B or C. We were in a point A because we were in a maze. Under this very undemocratic constitution and some other obstacles, some other structural violence, some other black magic of the army, we were never reached anywhere else, even though the international community thought we reached out to the road to democracy. So I wrote this book, amazingly, we were walking and marching to the road to the destination, the democracy. But we got lost, of course, because of the maze. And my argument is there is no exit from this maze. For that reason, shall we just try to tearing down, getting rid of all the walls of the maze? And I try to identify what are the what are the walls of this maze. So I really encourage my community, my society. It's not just about the eliminating the military dictatorship. There are some other things we are not just building these walls, but somehow we have been reinforcing these walls. Then we cannot get out of, we cannot get back to the road to democracy. So then I think instead of finding the aces from this amazing maze, shall we just tearing down the walls of the maze and get back to the road to democracy?
Do you think it's an irony in a way that this coup beginning, the protests against it to begin with were about reinstating the elected government, but really it's become a revolution. So it's a kind of movement through, a thinking through. Is that part of what you think has happened?
Yes, of course. The real challenge for us in this past decade to administration is the 2008 Constitution. For that reason, somehow people say, okay, it's good to have this coup. Otherwise, under the title of reconciliation, it was never been a real, true reconciliation between the civilians and the military people. But because of this trap, because of this maze, we just come along and we just enjoying some small little bit of this space. But we thought it's a democracy, something like that. But now the good thing is people understand what's the barriers, what's the walls, and then started tearing down all the walls. So the positive side effect of the outcomes from the coup is people are now more understanding about what they were and what they're supposed to do. Something like that. So somehow it's good enough to making themselves how much they are needed, and they are the key players to make a real change for the country.
We're going to go to questions in about 5 minutes, but I have a couple more that I'm going to ask you before we move into that next phase of the evening. So we can't really leave this discussion without asking what you know of Aung San Suu Kyi, what is happening, what is her state of welfare, and what is her role now in this kind of new movement as a leader?
Well, I think she, right now, we really don't know the whereabouts of her. She was in prison since 2022. Very difficult situation for the 79-year-old lady, and very terrible situation in the prisons in Naypyidaw. And it was supposed to, she was relocated to small little house somewhere in Naypyidaw in order to let her meet with some other international dignitaries, including from China and Thailand, something like that. But she resisted to cooperate with the military to have this chance because, she was arrested at the very beginning, so she couldn't know much about what's going on right now. That's why she tried not to make any comments, something like that, especially on the armed revolution. Their trick bug is they try to make her involved in saying that I disagree with the armed resistance, something like that. So, but she refrained from it, and I think, I might say she was trained as a gentleman in UK throughout her earlier days. For that reason, she really hoping that she has a ability to convince the military to get change. So that's why under the title of reconciliation, she did a lot of effort to make the better relationship, but indeed it was not. The series of incidents, I can say, that's why I wrote this a little bit thick book. Otherwise, I can just write a small little piece to say the challenge. But it was series of the incidents, how much she herself and the commander-in-chief having so much disagreement, and the subtle but obvious tension and conflict for so many incidences and the concepts. At the same time, I think they're still really afraid of her, you know. Her way of handling things was not very okay to our eyes, especially on the issues of the Rohingya and the Rakhine incident. But after some times, because of these, so many information has been disclosed. Right now, we know, I can say the current Commander-in-Chief, he has a big fear of putting into the ICC trial. So after some development of the ICJ trial, he was thinking Aung San Suu Kyi and NLD might disclose all the hidden wrongdoing of his own and the military at some point, and then move to another trial. So his fear of putting into the ICJ and ICC is part of the reasons for the coup.
So his personal fear of being held accountable.
Yeah, because, you know, he turned out 60 at 60 years of age in 2015, and then he requested Aung San Suu Kyi and the president, NLD presidents, to give him another 5 years, the extensions of the term, but they denied. But according to this very undemocratic constitution, he can unilaterally extend his term. So Commander-in-Chief recommended himself for another 5 years term and saying that I couldn't find any suitable persons. So his another extensions will be due in 2021. For that reason, he has a big fear. If he has no power, he won't make himself secure. So that's for that reason, I think, yeah, he truly needs to hold the power to keep his security beyond.
To be safe.
That's why he made this coup.
Yeah. Well, we're about 2 minutes from questions, but from the outside, the situation in Myanmar, it looks really desperate, I have to say. The armed conflicts, you know, the bombings that we hear about, the extrajudicial killings, you know, tens of thousands of people, most recently conscription of young men fleeing their jobs, fleeing the country. It looks like the people are suffering very, very deeply for democracy. So what is your feeling for the future? Do you feel hopeful?
Yes, I do. Because this is the moment of we having more or less more strategic unity among the different groups of people, different identity. We do have more than round about 100 different groups, the different identities. So it was not very united. Right now, of course, we still have some kind of the dispute and the argument among these different identities, but against the military, they all are strategically united. So that's a very good moment. And on the other hand, I think the situation on the ground is the military fight every single battles on the ground to the people defense forces and ethnic armed forces. For that reason, they use the airstrikes. You know, up to now, it's been almost 20,000 airstrikes in this 3 years' time. You know, they use a lot of the airstrikes, arsons, and they even kill people burning alive. That's kind of things going on. But the stubborn resistance from the ground is still going on, and most of the border area has been under the hands of the ethnic armed forces and the people defense forces already. So the only border trades incomes is now cannot control by the military right now. So I think the two things. One thing is the literally armed fightings, they are failing. And on the other hand, because of the conscription law, a lot of the workforces has run out from the country or from their workforce. So the economic failing is going on. Countries is still heading to the phase state deliberately, designed by the military. And since he has no capacity of any kind of the decent governance, so the chaos on the ground is so high and intense right now, but ridiculously they are also fighting each other in the high-ranking military officers level, something like that. So the whole picture sounds pretty much chaotic, but more on their side, more on the military side. So I think truly they cannot control the power anymore, because the highest rate of defection is going on, and they also lie to us, the population of the combatants. So for that reason, they run out of their human resources and they establish this conscription law. So the way they handle for their own institution is like this self-sabotage. So for that reason, I think the military institution itself is very much not in control. It's a total disarray right now.
It seems like huge destruction all round to kind of get these tiny green shoots of democracy, such a valued thing, to kind of start to grow. I'm going to ask for the house lights to come on, and we're going to start the questions. But in the meantime, as people kind of gather what they want to ask, and our ushers who will come to you with a microphone if you have a question, while that's kind of happening, I have to say, I have to ask you about where the courage and steadfastness comes from to kind of continue writing, continue fighting, continue to, like, writing this book, researching this book. It's not a slow act. It's a long, protracted process. And every day requires courage to keep going, every day to kind of continue with this. So how does that come to you? Where does that come from? What do you draw on?
Probably, maybe if my country in peace and in democracy, I might not need this this kind of things holding, I really wish I can get a rest, proper rest. But since my country and my peoples are suffering, how can I stop?
I don't know. I often think if I were in the same position, I was born in Burma, if I had grown up there, what I would do. And I don't know that I would have been able to do what you have done. I have to say that, honestly. But I'm going to go to questions from the audience now. Does anybody have a question for Ma Thida? The ushers will come to you and they'll bring you a microphone.
Thank you. My name is Graham, and I must say thank you so much for your advocacy and your determination, and for your interesting presentation. You've talked quite a lot about writers and their precarious role. I wonder if you'd just mention something about Myanmar people as readers. We're told that the level of literacy in Myanmar is extremely high, unusually so, and I wonder what people read other than 19th century British novels.
Well, after the relaxations of the censorship, people have more chance to explore. And I think because of the new era of the digital platform, and they can reach out to more books, then I think they are, especially I think according to some resources, I can see the highest reading population is from round about 20 to 40 years old age right now. They are the biggest. And even in the base of the, a lot of young people, they are now joining the People Defense Forces. Of course, they are in some areas and they have the base for the battalions, but they also do have libraries there. So the National Unity Government, it's a kind of the opposition league, it's not just doing the resistance kind of activities, but also providing the public services, so including the education online and health services on the ground and through online, something like that. At the same time, they are making the both physical and the online libraries.
Amazing.
Hi, thank you so much again for sharing your experiences with those of us who are very privileged to not to be facing the sorts of threats of violence, etc., that you are. I really appreciate that. Like you, Michelle, I was in Myanmar in 2014, and I think it might have been just after Obama had been there, and it was almost like there was a bright, shining light for Myanmar at the time. And then a couple of years later, it was almost like the Western press turned away, the Western world turned away, and it's been really hard to get any information externally or internationally or from our perspective in Australia about what's going on there. So I'm wondering, there's a couple of questions. One is, what sort of access do foreign journalists have in Myanmar? And also, are you aware, or is there a sort of a soft diplomacy or hard diplomacy, whatever's required, happening that might also give us some hope from our perspective?
Yeah, I think the challenge about the journalism is not just about the Myanmar journalists, but also for the international journalists, because our issue is so much complex and so long history. So the journalists cannot understand deeply into it. That's why I decided to write this pretty thick book. For them, it's just to cover the ad hoc situation, and it's very difficult to explain for the deeper understanding. So that's why I don't blame. The other reasons is indeed, till now in my country, there is no bill about the right to information. So even if we don't have enough information, how can the other people can have this information? So that's why I understand this situation. And I think after this 2021, the diplomacy through the National Unity Government is going on. And recently, here in Australia, the Foreign Minister of the National Unity Government is meeting the Prime Minister of Australia quite recently, I think yesterday. So that there is some kind of the advocacy, especially towards the democratic countries, even though the Southeast Asia and some other not yet democratic countries are not very supporting for us. So for that reason, I think this is the time for seriously thinking about the international intervention for making, if it is not, I do believe all the conflicts will be ended only on the table, something like that. So for that reasons, making more understanding deeper into the issue. Otherwise, even though the mediation cannot solve much problems, something like that. So hopefully, with this kind of the invitation from the Prime Minister of Australia, the other countries started inviting the National Unity Government and other opposition leaders. That's a good sign.
Highly recommend your book, which is also available at the back of the room. There's a few copies and copies on pre-order. We probably have time for maybe one last question, I think. Okay, I'll let the ushers, there's one at the front and one in the middle. And
Hello, Mingalava.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for being, the voice for all of us. And the gentleman mentioned that we have a surge in the interest for Burma, which is like quite a surprise to me because I've been talking to a lot of people, including my kids' parents. So a lot of people, they don't know about Burma, what's going on in there, and let alone, what is going on right now. Yeah. So this coup, right? So this coup is, when this happened, so a lot of people think that the generation is the Gen Z. We call it Gen Z, right? So Gen Z, they play game, they grew up watching computer, they grew up like doing a lot of like soft stuff, and they're not really hardened. So we thought, okay, the coup, how are they going to defeat? how are they going to resist? Because I'm like 40 plus going to 50. So I've been outside Burma for like 25 years. So I thought, oh, okay, this is another doom. So our force down is already become desk. It's too quick. But the Gen Z, the way they define the coup is really shocking. Back in early this year, I went to Thailand, and I went to Mesot, and I went to those safe houses and the places where kids rehabilitate. So I've seen a lot of teenagers who are supposed to be in the university, but they're not in a good shape. They lost limb, they lost hand, they lost one leg. I see the scar on their head. I brought my teenager son, 13 years old son, to the camp to let him see that how fortunate he is. So Ma Thida mentioned about the resistance, ongoing fighting, people BNK fighting, and diaspora community is supporting those resistance. But besides fighting, besides war, besides weapon, there are a lot of people become I would say collateral damage because of the war, and they need to continue living. They need to continue the life. They cannot fight physically, but they still have to fight. They want to support. So what we are doing right now is that around the world, people like me and a lot of people come together, and we try to support those people on the ground financially, and also we collaborate with the National Unity Government and also Ministry of Defense. And the way we are doing is that we build all the online portal, make sure everything going to the government, ASI government, and to the ground, and to the resistance group, whatever they need. So what I would like to request, Siama, is that we would like you to voice out more for us in such a way that, the people like us supporting this, our own community, not just me, around the world. Of course, there are a lot of organizations around the world doing this charity, but you realize that when you donate $1, only probably 10 cents, 20 cents reach to the ground, the rest go to the overhead. But people like us stay outside for Burma for 25, 26 years, and I can happily forget, what's going on over there, but I can't. So we invest our time, we sacrifice a lot of things, and we take zero overhead cost, and we donate everything on the ground. And also, when I say to donate on the ground, not about battle, not about weapon, just remember those Gen Z kids lost limbs, lost hands, and they still have to go on for their life.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would like to pledge.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much. I think there's been a couple of potential things here. Our own administration, we can contact our MPs and kind of praise the sort of behaviour that we kind of want to encourage. And thank you very much for telling us what the diaspora are up to. There are lots of organisations that are kind of funding the various activities there. So thank you very much. Well, we've gone a little bit over time. I'm sorry about that. But Ma Thida, I just wanted to thank you. Chris is going to come up and thank everybody. I just wanted to remind everybody at the back of the room, books are being on sale.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
Chris?
I'm left pretty breathless by this short amount of time to have traversed so much knowledge and so much deep understanding of what's really been happening and continuing to happen inside Myanmar. It's just been wonderful to have your insights and your understandings given to us so beautifully tonight. And I know we all wish you well for the future of your country and your own work, and for the people, as you've mentioned, who really need so much support. And thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you so much.